Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel. We've got tonight's topic is HR best practices, hiring and being hired. We have a very esteemed group of panelists here. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, but we have Susan Pereira, Everett Walker, and Sam Santiago. Why don't you guys do a brief introduction, and we'll start with you, Susan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Pereira. I'm an HR director with Illinois Toolworks. I've been 25 plus years in human resources, right now on the strategic side of talent development and organizational design. I am a UTA alum. I got my undergraduate degree in business management and my MBA. So I'm pleased to be here talking to my fellow Mavericks and helping you get your first career.
Fantastic. Thank you. How
Thank
about
you.
you, Everett?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Everett Walker. I am the Chief of Staffing and Employment Services at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission here in Washington, D.C. I attended University of Texas at Arlington for a couple of years. I liked it so much that I had to go back and continue to get some more degrees there. So go Mavs, everyone. I'm very fortunate to be here and to share some of my experiences with everyone. And thank you, Dr. Bell and Dr. Benson, for having me.
Thank you very much. Sam Santiago, why don't you go next?
Hello to all of you. I'm Sam Santiago. I am not a UTA alum, but I try to be as connected as I can supporting the great work of the UTA team. I am the co-owner and chief administrative officer of Grupo San Cobian. It is a group of companies that is based in Mexico City and Manzanillo, Mexico. At the same time, we also keep a home here in the Dallas area, trying to continue to be connected with the great work that we're doing in getting the next generation of business leaders, corporate leaders, even entrepreneurs ready for Texas and the world. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Sam. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. George Benson. I'm chair of the management department here at UTA, former chair of the Masters in HR program. And the format for tonight is we're going to do some structured Q&A with our panelists, high level themes, but what's going on in the world of hiring and staffing and talent management. Then we'll open it up for questions and have a little back and forth. So we'll go ahead and get started. And so my first question to the panel is how do you see things changing in terms of hiring and recruiting now kind of post-COVID, number one, and then number two in a time of basically full employment here in the US. And Susan, why don't you go first?
Sure. I've noticed three changes in the hiring trends. Time to hire, obviously the use of digital recruiting, and an increased use of assessment tools. So when we talk about time to hire, we're talking about when a company publicly makes an opportunity known to the first day the candidate of choice starts. That typically had been 90 to 100 days. Now I'm seeing that that's cut in half by 45 to 50 days. So what this means for people searching for a position, responsiveness. Once an employer reaches out to you to engage interest, you need to respond quickly of your interest or perhaps self-eliminate. Maybe it's not the right option for you. When we went into the pandemic, recruiting was done digitally. That was about all we had. And now, as we're starting to come back out of the pandemic, digital recruiting is, I believe, here to stay, or at least it's going to be an element of the recruiting process. It used to be that initial interviews were on site, but now almost all initial interviews are being conducted digitally. Sometimes the entire hiring process is digital from initial contact to offer, especially if the candidate's not in the local market. So what this means for candidates is that you need to be prepared for digital interviewing. And that means an environment free of distraction. So no barking dogs, no family members in the background arguing about what to have for dinner, your cell phone's off, your laptop's off, and the background is rather neutral and not distracting to the interviewer. Another suggestion is to try to look directly into your camera. The tendency is to want to look down at the screen, but this doesn't give the interviewer a good opportunity to see directly at you. There's kind of a tilted look. So try to look into that camera. Because there's less personal contact between the candidate and the employer these days, as employers are getting closer to their top candidates, they're often reaching out and asking for assessment tools around skills or personal profiles. So what this means for you as a candidate, one, don't be surprised if you're asked to complete one of these tools and there are not right and wrong answers to these tools. They typically take 15 to 20 minutes. Some of them you're probably familiar with, such as DISC, Myers-Briggs, Gallup. Find 15 minutes of quiet time, sit down, first response answers. So in summary, time to hire has been cut in half, so responsiveness is key. Also, be prepared for digital interviewing and make sure you have a distraction-free environment. And don't be surprised if you're asked to participate in assessments and there's no right and wrong answers. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Mhm.
Everett, how about you? What do you see as the way that that hiring, recruiting, and hiring and selection are evolving?
Oh, just some of the same lines that Susan just mentioned. I mean, it's transformed dramatically with the increase in the use and advancements in technology. We depend on it a lot more now if we ever did before, because of the COVID and pandemic. Tools like interviewing and interviewing scheduling software have also helped us to streamline and the hiring process, saving both time and money, all while making the hiring manager's job much easier. It's also now easier, like Susan said, to see a deep pool of qualified candidates. With so many people that have access to the internet and different application formats, we're now seeing an increase of the candidates that we're actually seeing out there to be assessed for these different tools and these different questionnaires. So you really want to make sure that you're standing apart in any way that you can. And we'll get to that, I'm sure, in the next part. Don't want to break too much, but you really want to set yourself apart a little bit if you can, especially at those initial stages. What I've seen is there are greater emphasis on employee branding. Employers are doing a better job of showing what the company's mission is with video clips, advertisements. They're also able to show how the different demographics of their workforce and company culture look. So it's not just about, how well you fit within the country. It's also about how well their team is already made up. People aren't just looking for work-life balance anymore because we pretty much have that with the hybrid work environments, remote work environments now. So people are looking more for the culture. So going out there and looking at the brand of that organization, that company, to see how well you fit in with them, especially if you want to advance within that company. I think that's a great tip to have.
Okay, thank you, Everett. Sam, how about you?
In my case, completely agree with what Everett and Susan have mentioned before. I'd like to add three other things that I believe are important and have definitely changed dramatically over the last probably 2 years, maybe a little bit more than that. We have transitioned to a more casual tone to a lot of these conversations. A lot of the exchanges between recruiters and potential candidates are about, well, let's have a conversation, or let's have a chat, or let's have a convo, or whatever the term might be, right? Whether it's a little more formal or slang. But talking about formal, at the end of the day, I think that we all appreciate, only out of deference, at least initially, to have an opportunity to kind of suss each other out by starting out at a place where you have a level of respect, not only for the other person that you're having the conversation with, but also for the process itself. It is a delicate dance, right, between the recruiter or the interviewer and the candidate, and you don't want to come out as casual or as too slangy. You got to be careful with your language.
Read the
You got to
room.
be careful with you have to read the room. You have to be careful with what you write. If they're asking you to put information in the chat room or in the chat section of the whatever virtual platform you might be using. The time to be over familiar is not quite the first interview, maybe not even the second interview.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point, which actually takes me to the next point that I want to make. At some point, then, try to figure out exactly who you're talking to, and then find the time, which I think is a little bit different from what we've been doing for many years before, to share a part of you that is relevant to the job, but it may not necessarily be on the job description. So if for example, the job is not asking for language skills, let's talk about that for a second. Being bilingual, Spanish is my first language. I was born, raised, and educated in Puerto Rico. That's why I didn't go to a UTA. Then, at some point, I will mention a little bit about the fact that I can speak the language and that I am comfortable not only with the language, but with the culture. Again, it might not be something that they're looking for that particular job, but you just don't know that it might give you, the winning edge.
Yeah.
And last but not least, be ready to adapt and be flexible. Things are moving at a lightning pace. I think that younger generations, having kids and being involved with a lot of younger groups of professionals that are trying to move up in this world, we know that the tendency to respond a little bit faster and the tendency to require things that to happen a lot faster than it used to be, it's something that we're all getting used to. So whether it is that it's happening a little bit faster for you or not, just be on the lookout for, you have 24 hours to respond to that assessment, right, that Susan was talking about. Trust me, most companies, for the most part, they're not doing it to trick you. They're doing it because the process is moving probably a little bit faster than you'd like to. So find a way to find yourself in that space and time where you can respond to what you're being asked to do in a way that is conscientious and that you're in that space and time at that moment.
Those are all great points. Thank you very much, everybody. I have a question about kind of the balance between fit with the job requirements or technical skills and kind of cultural fit with the organization and the team that you're going to be working with. And I'm interested from the panelists, how do you balance those two in your selection practices? And then how can job seekers, right, communicate both that fit with the job requirements as well as understand and fit with the culture? Maybe we'll start with Everett this time. If you don't mind, Everett.
Yeah, for us, we obviously, when we get to that last round of interviews, technical skills is going to be met by each of those candidates, right? So now we're looking at something like what we call soft skills. What are you going to bring that necessarily is going to set you apart from that other candidate besides what's on paper? All right. And so you're looking to see, all right, culture fit. How are we as an organization? So maybe we are a little bit more casual. Maybe we like to be a family-oriented organization. So we're looking to see if this person is going to fit with us, not just by doing the job, but actually being our family member. So it's just knowing that aspect of it and just seeing and asking more like personable questions, still within the guidelines, but making sure that we get a good fit and get remedy for how this person is actually going to fit in with us, because we want them to stay. All right, we don't want to have turnover. We want to make sure we get the good fit for our organization. So that's what I look for.
Yeah, very good. Sam, how about you? How are you guys kind of identifying that cultural fit with the organization?
It's the most important conversation you can have with a potential candidate. So if you, as a recruiter, you're going through the selection process and you're not talking about culture and providing the candidate an opportunity to truly understand beyond what may be published, right, publicly, whether it's a website or through the job placement board or whatever that may be, if you're not giving them an opportunity to understand that, then you're really failing the selection process and you're failing the candidates, because you're asking them to join an organization, whether it is 10 people or 10,000 people, that they might really don't want to be part of, because the job is great, the opportunity is amazing, they can do the job, they have the education to do it,
Yeah.
but it's not the right environment. So you have to be very careful as a recruiter, and very briefly as a candidate, if they're not providing you that with that information, be very careful, ask for it, and if they're not providing you with the answer that you're looking for, you might want to think twice about it.
Yeah. Susan, same question to you, identifying that cultural fit with the organization.
Sure. First of all, as an employer, we make sure that we try to have our all of our social media very robust, with representation of our culture, right? So when we're talking with candidates, we have a series of, or I have a series of questions that I try to engage. They're a little bit informal and very open-ended, you know.
Can you give us an example?
It sounds rather old-fashioned, but what do you do when you're not studying, right? Okay. Or what do you engage in? Where do you get your energy from, right? And sometimes that invites them to say things about family or what their hobbies are, how they think. One thing that I have found that can be a bit of an attention getter for potential candidates is building their own little website that might talk about personal travels, their hobbies, their interests, just to tell us a little bit more about that. And it's been very helpful for me for candidates that have taken that time and include that link to their resume, because it does give us a little bit of insight into that culture. So I think that's something that a potential candidate can do. And as I said, we use a lot of open-ended questions just to try to get people to engage about what they do, not thinking about a work environment, but outside of the work environment.
That's great. Thank you very much. Let's flip that around now. So we have some potential job seekers, I'm sure, that are watching this now.
Yeah.
What kinds of questions would you suggest for job seekers to understand the kind of culture that they're coming into of the organization? Like, what are some key indicators that they can use to understand if this is the right fit for them, either in an interview or by looking, for example, at the social media? Susan, why don't you start this off?
Oh, sure. I think some of the questions that job seekers can ask is, tell us about the work-life balance from your organization, and because some organizations don't have hybrid models anymore, some are still traditional, some are completely remote. So a job seeker could ask, tell us about that. They could also ask about employee relations events. What do you as a company do for fun, if you will?
Yes,
right?
flip back on them, yes. Yeah.
Or tell me about your employee engagement policy or practices, right? So these are three very easy questions to ask, which I would think a candidate would want to know, because as I think Everett and Sam have both kind of expressed, we're looking for a fit with the culture and the values and the methodologies that we use for working, right? So for instance, we're not a very rigid policy and practice type company. We're more general direction and guidelines. Some people, that's not a good fit. It's not a good personal fit. So those would be some questions I would suggest candidates ask.
Sam, how about you? What can job seekers do to better understand the culture?
Yeah, I think that questions about location. Where are your locations? Where are your branches? If I get a recruiter that asks the question about, are you willing to relocate, right? I think that it's important that I even ask and say, why are you based in fill in the blank, right? So I think that we'll all agree that we have very different ideas of what a company would look like if it's located in California as opposed to New York or Florida. So that in itself is very, very telling. I would like all of us to think that location really doesn't matter, but when you're drawing, for the most part, the vast majority of your talent from a certain part of this vast country, not to mention as an entrepreneur now that is doing business in Mexico, obviously it's a very different deal. It does provide you with an opportunity to understand and sort of, and maybe your biases will play a little bit into all of that. And you're going to think, if they're based in California, it's this. If they're based in New York, it's that. If they're a global organization, there's something entirely different. But ask why, not only ask about the locations, but ask why. And ask why about as many questions or as many facts as the recruiter will share with you, because that can be very telling.
Yeah. Everett, same question to you.
Yeah, everything everyone's mentioned is great. And I was also thinking it may sound like minimal, but the supervisor to employee ratio to me is a big one. I know if you have like a supervisor who's going to be over maybe 70, 80 people versus someone who's going to be over small teams, there may be a decision maker. Maybe you want to have a more intimate relationship with someone you're working under, and your teammates and things of that nature. Also, like Susan said, with engagement, how often are we engaging with those that are at the higher up levels? Are we having brown bag sessions, town halls? Are we asked to give our input on certain policies? Are we all inclusive? Is it just, a top down approach, or are we doing 360 feedback? So those things to me also establish a culture at the organization as well.
That's great. Thank you for yours. I think the message for the job seekers, through all of this, is it's okay to ask these kinds of questions. Ask the recruiter, why do you like working here? Like, what is it about this organization? So you guys were talking about kind of this final selection parts of the process and the cultural fit. How about the very beginning? How about getting noticed, like either through a digital application, or how you put together your resume, or how you interact with perhaps the assessment test or the ATS, the applicant tracking systems? And Sam, I'll start with you. What would you recommend for students to try to get noticed for those initial selection moments?
The number one recommendation is get involved with your community and get involved with student professional organizations, because they provide with networking opportunities that you will probably won't have access to otherwise. So if you have a student association that you can be part of, that is a great way to get started. And then the flip side of that, being involved in campus is one thing, but being involved in the community is a completely different thing. And more often than not, you will find professionals, you will find executives, you'll find all kinds of decision makers in these nonprofit community organizations for which you hopefully are already volunteering for, or if not, then definitely I want to make sure that you do so as soon as we're done with this session. And I have a few recommendations I'll be happy to share with you when is the right time to do so. But that, it's a great opportunity to meet some of these individuals that are making decisions about who's coming on board or not, face to face, in an environment that is, no stress, no pressure. You're doing something obviously that you're doing together that you're probably very passionate about. And that's something that I would recommend highly. Network, network, network. I cannot say that enough.
That's great advice. Thank you. Susan, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to focus on a little bit more the initial digital type contact, because there are ways to get noticed, and there are ways to get noticed, right? So let's look a little bit about the ways to get noticed from the I think a real go-to is a LinkedIn profile. That's a great way, but make sure that your profile is polished and it's up to date. If you do choose to include a headshot, make sure it's either a professional one or at least not a selfie. Have somebody else take that. I did mention a little bit about the personal built website as an attention getter. That's a real from kind of the look and feel of a resume. You kind of want it to be crisp and clean, succinct. It's okay to use soft design and soft colors, make them eye appealing, not eye offensive. Don't attach a GIF to it as an attention getter. GIFs are not professional, and they really kind of don't tell the recruiter or the company much of anything. So those are some ways of kind of getting noticed from the side. And it may seem a little old-fashioned, but cover letters or a brief introductory cover paragraph is still a nice way for the employer to get a little bit more information about why you think you're a good match for that opportunity. Now, the getting noticed the way might not always help you out. So a couple of bits of suggestion would be too descriptive of an email address, like I'm a wild one at yahoo.com or cool guy or cool dude at Gmail, isn't really professional. And you have to understand there's a lot of candidates, and you want to have a professional email address, preferably one that has your name and perhaps which university you're from. John Smith at uta.edu. So there's an instant connection back to the candidate. Social media accounts. My advice is don't have anything on your social media accounts that you don't want a potential employer to know about you. We do use social media as a way to find out a little bit more about candidates. So make sure it's stuff that you would want a potential employer to know.
Or change your privacy settings.
Or change your privacy settings, absolutely. And if there's any kind of online forms, applications, make sure you fill out all the applicable spots, because it's almost a guaranteed set aside if those online forms don't come in with the right data. So a couple of ways to get noticed, the and the So put in a little extra effort and make sure you've got a nice LinkedIn profile, good professional email address, that your social media is either privacy settings changed or it's been sanitized a little bit. And then cover letters never hurt.
And Google yourself.
Yes. Find out what's out there about you.
So,
yep.
Everett, how about you? What
So
recommendations do you have for getting noticed?
I have two things. First, I'm going to piggyback off of what Susan was saying as far as resumes. With technology, like I said earlier, there are so many applicants applying that you do want to set yourself apart. I always say at the top, mention some competencies or KSAs that align with that position. That way it doesn't seem too generic, because you don't want to keep using the same resume to keep applying to the same or different positions. You want to stand out. The second thing, since I do work in the public sector, we're a little bit more streamlined as far as our hiring practices go, but there's a lot of different agencies that do a lot of different unique things. And I don't think a lot of people know about that. And so going to those agencies' websites and usajobs.gov gives you a really good insight on what's all out there. And they're always hiring interns every year. We have to, as a part of our mandates. And so going out there, seeing what's out there, looking at those different videos, the links, there's so many resources that are underutilized, and just going out there and Googling, using those search engines for your benefit. It takes about 2 seconds to type in a keyword and all of these different things will pop up. So those are my two standpoints, because I really want us to kind of recruit more students, but I feel like a lot of students don't always know the right places to go.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. Everett, I'm gonna go back to, do you guys in any of your organizations use any of the digital electronic tools that we've been talking a little bit about, like the applicant tracking systems or video interviewing, or perhaps machine learning based tools? And do you have any advice for students as they're navigating through the technology of applying for a job?
Yeah, we use all of them that you just mentioned, actually. LinkedIn is a big one, like Susan said. It's just a little bit more professional as opposed to maybe Twitter, although we do tweet and put things out there, but like you want to make sure you separate your personal one from your private one. But yes, as far as video interviewing, actually video sharing, a lot of those different things are how we train nowadays too, in a hybrid and a remote environment. So really getting abreast of knowing how you can use technology to your advantage, getting brushed up on different Excel tools, assets, like different things that are on all of your Microsoft computers, but knowing the ins and outs and how you can use those to your advantage, besides just doing the normal like pie graphs and different things that we learn in, like, lower graded school, knowing how to use those to your benefit to kind of make you stand out even more.
And Sam, how about you? Do you use any of those digital tools for recruiting?
In our current market, we're literally focused exclusively on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
So that's where tons of people of all ages are spending most of their time on. And we've been getting good results and trying to get a vast array of diverse candidates that will bring in the skills that we're looking for. So as a candidate, for a potential job or seeking your next opportunity, keep your eyes peeled while you're at it, right? You're on Instagram already quite a bit. Keep your eyes peeled on what the opportunities might be out there, and use keywords, right? So everything's about keywords, and that's probably one of the most important things that you can do.
Yeah.
So whether it is that you are putting yourself out there, publishing activities or events, or just simply photos, if you're utilizing those as a way of getting noticed, right? We talked about that a little while ago. Then make sure that you tag them with the right keywords, or even some of the organizations that you're associated with, right? So it might be, 2 or 3 of the nonprofit community organizations that you're involved with, or maybe your university, or maybe even, whatever company you did your internship last summer. Try to connect, try to help yourself make the connection so others can find you online.
Yeah, very good. Susan, the same question to you. Any recommendations for the students for navigating through the digital tools of recruiting and hiring?
Yeah, I think Everett and Sam really hit on the key points. Like my peers here, we use the software scanning tools. We have the online ATS. So I guess I just want to reinforce that keyword. Make sure that as you're looking at the opportunity that the employer has, that you're building into that resume those keywords,
Yeah.
so you're not self-eliminating. And Everett kind of pointed that out too, about something introductory that doesn't make the resume the same for each role that may be an opportunity. Because what the employer is looking for is a candidate that really has understood the opportunity and knows themselves enough to say, I'm a good match for that. That we need to be connected.
So if I'm hearing from everyone, it's really understanding that you're not using the same resume to apply to every job. That you are
Right.
customizing the resume and how you are seeking the job for the opportunity. That you do your due diligence on both the opportunity and the company, particularly at the very beginning stages, and then definitely through the interview part.
Yeah. And I know I've mentioned a couple of times about cover letter, and that probably does sound very, very old school. But again, it's a way of assessing the opportunity and understanding the ability to be a match. And as we talked about earlier, none of us want turnover or attrition,
Yeah.
right? We want to make a good match, both candidate and employer. And it's finding a job is a job.
Yeah.
Okay. That's.
Do you guys have any more general recommendations for our students as they go out as job seekers? And I'll ask, more specifically, how about when we get into the interview? Like, what sets apart a good interview? So, number one, some general advice, and number two, what makes a good interview? And, I'm not sure we started with last time. Maybe Sam, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'm ready to answer that question. Think about the selection process as and deliver a performance that sounds like you are an entrepreneur, that you are the business owner, that you're taking ownership for the outcomes of the organization that you're trying to join. Because eventually, for some of us, it might take a few decades. In the case of my husband, it took maybe just over a year to quickly realize, after grad school and after all his education, that he wanted to have his own business, right? And that's what we're now expanding on together. Because that's, at the end of the day, what we as recruiters like to hear. People that are committed, people that are just not there to sit and do whatever they're told to do. We're looking for people that have ideas and that will bring the business to the next level. Even if you think it's only in your own little area, it might not be as little as you think it is. And you just never know when that desire and that drive to be a leader, even if you're in your late teens, early 20s, is exactly what that company is looking for. And companies that deserve you as a candidate and eventually as an employer, they will appreciate that. If they don't, then maybe that's not the place for you to go.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Thank you very much. One of the things I always tell students is, remember, they want to hire you, right? That's why they're talking to you. They really want to hire you, and you should go in with that that view. What do you bring? What do you bring to this organization? Susan, how about you? What advice do you have, and particularly for the interview?
I think before a candidate comes in for the interview, I mean, there's the obvious things that you've done some research about the company, you understand their values, their business tenets. So that's kind of a given. And if you show up with not having that information already, that's pretty much, it's like the
Yeah.
ante playing poker, right? You need to know about the company that you're interviewing with. What we look for in candidates are those candidates that have invested enough in themselves to understand what they're looking for, both from a cultural and value proposition fit, and also have they done enough homework about occupational assessments, personal profiling? Is this an industry that suits me? Is this culture something that suits me? So we look for candidates that have done that personal investment in themselves first before coming to start their career. And there's a difference in looking for a job, aka a paycheck, I got to pay off all those student loans, and a career, but you can do both. But it takes an investment in yourself and knowing yourself and what's going to be a suitable fit. So that's what we look for a lot.
Thank you. That's great advice. Everett, before I give you a chance to answer, I'll just ask the folks that are on with us, be prepared with your questions. I think we can either do it through the chat, or if you'd like to open up your microphone, that would be fine too. Everett, what kind of advice do you have for folks that are seeking jobs, general advice, and then in particular when they get to the interview stage, how to distinguish themselves?
Yeah, Susan hit the nail on the head with that. You definitely want to show how you invested in yourself before you want someone else to invest in you. But also illustrate in a professional way without seeming too arrogant how you are going to be a great return on investment for that company. Because you're adding to them, right? Because they're seeking something, because they're lacking something. So you want to show how you can be a great asset for them. Also, don't be afraid to pivot. It's okay if you don't have all of the experience that you need, but
Advice,
never just answer a question with, no, I don't have that. Well, I don't have this in this area. However,
Good.
I have gained this in these other fields. That way you're showing that you're adaptable, and maybe we can teach you these things and you're teachable as well. Also, Susan just mentioned student loans. This will be a good time, maybe during like the second or third round interview, where you be asked them, what do you offer? It's nothing wrong with asking those type of questions to say, hey, I noticed on your website here you have student loan reimbursements. Is it something that you guys are still offering? Can you tell me more about that? It just shows you that you're interested, you've done your research, and there's nothing wrong with asking those type of questions.
Yeah, don't ask how much you're going to be paid until they offer you the job. All right. So, do we have questions from the participants from the folks listening in the webinar? Myrtle's busy typing, so Myrtle asks, what if you don't have the best grades? How do you position yourself in this discussion? Thank you, Myrtle, for the question. Does everybody have to be a superstar?
Let me say very briefly, I think we would all want to strive for that.
Right.
But if you're not there because you're, let me call it as it is, you're too lazy to have good grades, then that's your own fault. And that's something that before you get to the interview, you need to be working on, because I don't know that it says a lot of good things about you that you're trying to show up somewhere where you're offering something that, at least from a grading or scoring perspective, and everything and everybody gets scored, right? Whether it's 5 stars or 5 points, or an Uber driver or an Uber passenger, right? We all get graded on something. And I don't know that you want to strive for mediocrity, right, in life and get there. So let's imagine for a moment that there's a reason for that, whether it is a death in the family or financial strains or whatever the reason might be. Be prepared to answer the question. Do not hide, do not lie, obviously. And show your moral fiber and your fortitude in sharing the reality of what's going on. a recruiter, a potential employer will appreciate that above a perfect score, right? A perfect grade. So just think about why you're not there, and if you have a good reason to share with a potential employer.
Give the context.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
Go ahead.
there's different ways to assess a candidate, just like there's different ways to assess a student. So although I know it's one way of telling you, how well someone may know something, everyone is not always a good test taker at the same time. Some people get test anxiety. So just knowing that what you bring to the table is what you bring to the table. And if you can illustrate that in some way and vocalize that, it could still mean that you could still be up for the opportunity. Now, we're not talking about failing when we say bad grades. You just mean not getting good A's, right? But still that, no, you don't have to be an A student per se, but you do need to be able to represent yourself in a way to say, hey, I know my stuff, basically.
And I agree a lot with Everett, with what Everett just said there. You don't have to be a straight A student. And there's nothing wrong with B's, okay? It just means that maybe that particular course wasn't quite in line with your natural propensity to be an English person versus a math person. So I know at least when we're scanning for fresh out college graduates, yes, we look at the grade point average, but that's just one data point. Okay. Sam mentioned earlier about community involvement and participation in groups, perhaps at the university. So grades are just one of several points that we look at. We have hired some straight A students that didn't make it. We've hired some people that had 2.5 averages and were superstars for the company. So it's only one data point. We look at a lot of other things.
Yeah.
But to Sam's comment, you may be able to have to own up to, well, it was my first year and it was party year and I was trying to get
But now I've got some momentum. I picked it up at the end. Yes.
There you go.
How about the corollary of experience? So perhaps if you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of professional experience, that you've had jobs, but they're not within the field that you're seeking, or they're not, office jobs, let's say, right? So what can folks do to build out their resume to be able to have things to talk about when they get questions like, how well do you work in teams, or ever had to problem solve with others, and these kinds of experience-based questions?
That was definitely me, Dr. Benson. I was an undergrad, I was still, taking a lot of courses, and I kept trying to apply to all these different jobs. And of course, they kept telling me that I needed experience. And my response in my head was, what if I don't ever get the chance to gain it? How am I supposed to get the opportunity to show it? But I had to get a realization that maybe I didn't have the technical expertise, but there were things that I were doing that was giving me those soft skills that I mentioned earlier. I was getting project management. I was giving customer service when I was leading my organizations on campus, when I was doing different things while volunteering. So there are different things that you can add to represent yourself that you may not have technically, but can still get you in the door.
Yeah. Sam or Susan, do you have something to add?
Very briefly, I'd like to say you have to prepare and you have to plan in advance, right? So this understanding that you're going to graduate, you're going to find a job right away, and that you're going to find the right fit and all that good stuff, that doesn't quite always happen. So if you're finding yourself in a situation where potentially, or because you're doing your homework, you're understanding that in order for you to land the job that you're looking for, you need that experience, then you need to start thinking about that, 2 years out, right? Not the year that you're graduating, because it's just going to make it 100 times more difficult to get where you want to be. Thus, the importance of getting involved, whether it is as a volunteer with a number of different organizations in campus, off campus, in your community, or really reaching out and seeking out those internship opportunities, because that's where you're going to get some of the credibility that you need as a professional. We take into consideration, Susan, I like what you said, right? There are a lot of different things that we look at when we're looking at a candidate. So we take into consideration your age and the years that you spent at school and all that good stuff. And we know already as you come to us that you might not have all the experience that we're looking for, but we are looking for that little bit of initiative and that little bit of, you did some planning to get here before you got here, that will put you over the edge and really ahead of other candidates. So do yourself a favor and do a little bit of planning for that, and seek out those opportunities, whether they're unpaid or whatever the situation might be. Even if it is for just a few months, it does make a difference.
Susan, how about you?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things that we also look at, and to talk to people in the audience about. Don't forget your high school experiences as well. So if you played team sports, or if you were in the marching band, these things show, first of all, teamwork and collaboration, right? Especially organized sports. And this kind of is pretty applicable also if you're looking for your first internship. Let's say you're sophomore or junior and you're trying to get that first internship. Look back to those high school activities, and you want to kind of call those out in your credentials. Hey, I was, if you were an officer in any type of sorority or fraternity of some sort, it shows leadership. We're talking about teamwork. Again, looking for those various points besides the grade and the school name, right?
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments from those listening in? Feel free to turn on your microphone, or feel free to, looks like we have a couple, right? So Lisa's asking, any advice for students who might have a disability or be neurodivergent going into the interview process, and particularly for the video interview, if that's the case? So questions about disability or neurodivergent applicants as they go through the interviews. Everett, why don't you start?
Yeah, for us, we work with our EEO office, and we offer different reasonable accommodations on different websites. So you would just have to go to that particular, for me, a different agency within the federal government, and they have different links on there. It's pretty streamlined, pretty straightforward on how they can assist you during the interview process, actually doing if you're hired, and different things of that initiative. So I would just go out there and try to do your research, but it is available.
That's great. That's a very good question. Thank you. Thank you. Susan, do you, yes?
Same sort of thing. There's ways to make contact with the company to set up, to accommodate certain, accommodations for the interviewing process. So again, to Everett's point, do your research. There's usually typically special links that you can reach out to.
Very good. Sam, do you have anything to offer an additional, or did they pretty much cover it?
Actually, one more thing. What Everett and Susan have mentioned makes perfect sense from the technical perspective. As an individual, to get ready for these opportunities, these interview opportunities, you might want to reach out to the employee resource group that brings together individuals with different abilities or with disabilities. The vast majority of the work that they do is actually trying to get the organization ready to deal with these individuals and to adapt, not to make the person with a disability or a different ability, whether it is cognitive or physical, adapt to the company, but the other way around. So these are going to be your advocates, and information about how you can reach them, whether it is directly through a contact or through the main department, mainly human resources, or another related department, is generally available on websites. So do a little bit of that research and have a conversation. Having led many of those employee research groups many years ago in my career, we were always more than happy to prepare students and, of course, participate in job fairs and other opportunities to have a one-on-one conversation with individuals who felt that as candidates they were lacking, when in fact they were just not lacking anything. They were fantastic candidates. think that you are a fantastic candidate, and the company that you would like to work for needs to be ready for you from that perspective specifically, and not the other way around.
That's a great point. Thank you very much. And so for students, if you're not familiar, employee resource groups are existing employees that work for the company that typically have some degree of affinity, and you can find them on their websites, or you could find them on LinkedIn. Oftentimes they have their own groups, and you could reach out to them directly that way.
And also, Dr. Bitts, can I add one more thing? About the disability question. So if you go to USA Jobs, if you're interested in a federal agency, we have different filters that you can put in. So you can put in Schedule A, what we call Schedule A disability, and it'll actually give you a list of all of our announcements that are trying to seek out to help with our initiatives, diversity and inclusion initiatives. Also, we have a filter for internships only. So for you that maybe not have a disability, but those of you who are looking for internships, you can look through USA Jobs that way also.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. I have a question for you guys, which is, once you've kind of made that initial, like you got the job or the internship, from like an internal recruiting perspective or talent management perspective, what are the kinds of things or skills or behaviors that you guys are looking for to convert that intern into a full-time job, or to move somebody out of an entry-level job into that next level of promotion? What are the kinds of skills, behaviors that the folks should focus on to move from that initial job? Sam, why don't we start with you?
Probably the most important thing that we're looking for is that individual has not only demonstrated an interest to go in that direction, but they have already engaged in some sort of, there's a special project, or there's this additional event that might be happening. There are always opportunities for candidates, and then once you're hired, new hires, if you're new to the organization, to demonstrate your desire to move on to the next level. And it's never too soon to do it. So as soon as you come on board and you see an opportunity to get involved with an event, these employee resource groups are great opportunities to participate in this event. And they give you visibility with the highest levels of leadership of the organization. And always be ready to have your 30-second spiel, because you never know. You might end up talking to the CEO of the company, right? He said, "Oh, who are you? What are you doing here? What do you do?" And if you're, mumbling your way through it, as opposed to having just 30 seconds of, "I just got here, I graduated from so-and-so, and I'm doing this job here, and I'm excited to be here. Great to meet you," whatever that may be, right? But just always be ready to say something good and exciting and very special about yourself.
Fantastic. Well done. Susan, how about you? What advice do you have for somebody in that kind of first job or internship?
In the internship or the first job, wanting to get to the next level, wherever you are in the organization, I think I would suggest look to your softer skills. Okay. It's assumed that you're going to be technically competent because you've been trained. And if you're not technically competent, the business is going to know that quickly, and a decision will be made. But look to your softer skills. How well you build collaboration. Do you build collaboration through influence, or are you an influencer versus kind of a bull in a china shop, right? So we look to those softer skills, and when we start to see that type of development, we'll actually approach people and encourage them to think about the next level or a different direction for their career, or lay out a potential career path. So don't forget, it's not all just technical competence. It's more that softer side, the collaborative, influencing, how to deliver results side, as opposed to just check the box, I did this task and that task.
Very good. Thank you. Everett, how about you? Same question.
I would say trying to see if that organization or agency has a mentorship program. I think that shows interest, and they links you with someone maybe in a position that you're seeking in the future, or it just gives you an idea to ask some questions that maybe you can't ask your superior or someone that you work closely under. Just got to get a feel for the organization. How do they develop their leaders? How do they develop their employees, and different things of that nature. Also, we use what we call IDPs, which are individual development plans. And so working on that to show I may be an internship now or an intern now, but I plan to be, XYZ in 5 years or in 10 years. And what are the steps that I need to get to that position? That shows you that you're devoted, that you want to stick with the agency, and again, that you're going to be or have a good return on investment.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, guys. That's all great advice. Wonderful. We do have a question in the chat, which is, what if you find yourself in that first job that's not quite up to your expectations, right? That perhaps this isn't the greatest fit, right? Any advice for somebody who finds themselves in that kind of mismatch, who doesn't want to leave and be perceived as a job hopper? Like, how to work through some of that? Everett, why don't you start?
Well, we always have to do what's best for us. And I always say, what's going to work for you. Whichever decision you can, live with or sleep with at night, that's what's going to work for you. But also, I'm a bit of an optimist, so I don't believe in ever being in a position, even though it may not have been a position of my choice at the time, where I didn't try to gain something from. When you go to different interviews, they're going to ask you, tell us about a time when you experienced difficulty working with such and such, or maybe you weren't motivated to do something. These are those times where you're going to gain that experience to be able to show how you persevered through an outcome. So I think you just have to look at it from the glass half full as opposed to half empty.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Susan, how about you?
I would advise having open dialogue with your supervisor or the HR group. Just come, let's say you've been in the job for 90 days and it's just not feeling like it's the right fit. Well, maybe that discussion with your supervisor collectively you can work to make it where it's a better fitting role, or maybe the business isn't tracking fast enough for what your personal desire was, and they need to know that, right? So my advice would be, as soon as you find yourself in that situation, go to your supervisor, manager, or the HR group and say, I've just got this feeling this is not a fit, and try to work through it together.
Sam, do you have any advice for that situation?
I like what Susan said about having a conversation with a supervisor or with a mentor, like what Everett mentioned. I launched the mentoring program for a large global organization, and was one of the most amazing opportunities I ever had, to help really hundreds of individuals to advance their careers. So having that conversation sometimes means having that conversation with yourself, because early on in your career, if you're thinking that you're going to transition from high school to undergrad to grad and then on to a professional life,
and everything's going to go fantastic and smooth all the time, right?
Yes.
It's going to be smooth,
and that everything's going to fit perfectly, and the world is going to adapt and flex and around you, right? And work exactly the way you want it to. You're sorely mistaken. I mean, that's a reality. I smile about it because I think that, when you're young and you're expecting the world to cater to your every need, which is fine, right? It's that's the way we feel, and we think that we deserve it, that we've earned it. Yeah. Well, that's not quite the reality. Yeah. So this is a time for you to step back for a moment and think why this job that you thought would be a good fit for you is not a good fit. And is it the company or is it me? Do I need to mature as a professional? You don't need to change your personality. You don't need to change who you are, but you need to think who you are now as a professional in this new environment. And maybe that feeling of not being in an environment or being part of an organization that it's not a good fit for you will eventually go away. I'm not as concerned with the issue of being a job hopper, because the reality is, I go back to what you mentioned, Everett, we have to do what we need to do for ourselves. And the reality of things is, if you're not happy, you're probably not going to be as productive, and you will probably harm your professional career more than you will help it. But just be patient. And I know that youth is not filled with a lot of patience, but be very patient and just self-reflect a little bit and see what is it exactly that's going on that is not a good fit. You will learn a lot along the way.
That's great. It's great advice. Thank you very much. So we just got like about a minute left, and I just want to close with, if you guys have any parting thoughts. And so my final question for the panel is there something that you wished you had been told before you went out to go get your first job, before you went through the process? Is there a piece of advice or a lesson that you had to learn, maybe the hard way, right? As you went through that first process transitioning from university to your first professional job. That's kind of a hard one. Susan, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm kind of thinking about what Sam just responded, and it's kind of, you get out there and you think it's all going to be this way and it's going to be rose-colored glasses,
Yeah.
and it's not, right? Now, people told me that,
Yeah.
like your parents,
Yeah, exactly.
and but we sometimes tend to ignore that, right? So the advice was there. I just chose to ignore it. Um, you know, but flexibility, I think, is
Yeah.
one of the things that as you're starting your career, you've got to constantly recalibrate, right? And I think we've kind of had a common theme here tonight, for our participants, about know yourself,
Yeah.
right? Know yourself, and that way you can make a good job selection.
Very good. Everett, how about you? Is there a lesson that you learned or something that you wish that you had been told before you went out to seek that job?
Yeah, I am a part of the millennial group, and I had to, quick realization that everything is not going to be on the fast track level as I would have hoped to
Yeah.
be. But it also taught me that sometimes doors close for a reason, and sometimes they're not closed, they're just cracked. Also, you have to know the difference between the two, and you have to really, like Sam was saying, have self-reflection skills, because some people will just divert and go backwards, but you have to still persevere and say, okay, maybe this is a sign that I'm actually not ready. And that's what I actually found out when I got to those positions throughout my career so far. I realized that I was being very ambitious and very gullible and naive. I wasn't ready for those roles. They knew it, but I just had to really work through it and figure that out for myself. And it's humbling. It really is. So just
That's
have to
great.
be, you have to be humble, but still be confident, like Susan said.
Yeah. I would say personally, it's like how hard you have to work to get that job.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
you're much more likely to get rejected than you are to get the
Oh,
job.
yes.
Just persevere, keep at it.
Yeah.
Don't
Sam,
be
we'll
afraid of
give you
no.
the last word.
All right. Two,
Is
two things that I wish I was told when I was younger. Number one, some of the best jobs you'll find are jobs where you have connections. Because for the most part, your connections, if you can trust them, and hopefully you can, they will tell you the truth. They will give you the inside scoop. They will give you the insights that you need in order for you to make the decision. It's not the only element, right, of the decision-making process, but most likely you'll be better off listening to somebody who already knows the organization, is already part of the organization, or could even recommend you, to the recruiter or even the decision maker. The times that I have followed that path, I've been wildly successful. That happened with job number one when I was 19 years of age, and the times that I've done it that way, it's definitely worked out best. And then, for lack of that opportunity, then go with your gut instinct. And the times that I have not listened to my gut instinct, there's something about the energy and the vibrations of the universe, whatever your faith may be, whatever you believe in, listen to that, because it exists, it's true, and if you ignore it, you might end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's not bad or good otherwise. It just might be a matter of the wrong time at the wrong place with the wrong people, and you just don't want to be there, obviously. So believe in yourself and believe in that gut feeling, because I don't know that I can describe it in a scientific way, but it works.
Yep, I think you captured it. Well, I want to say thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you, Everett. Thank you, Sam. This has been a very engaging hour. Really appreciate your time. Go Mavericks. And thank you to all of our participants who have logged in. And if you're interested, please follow up with our panel. We talked about LinkedIn. I would encourage all of you guys to ping them on LinkedIn. And this will also be available, posted on the UTA College of Business website. So thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate everything, and thank you, Mary Beth, for putting and Merle for putting the panel together.
Yep.
Go Mavericks! Yes, indeed.
Go Mavericks!
Mavericks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, you guys.
Good night, everyone.